Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Football, it began simple enough. Line up 11 men on one side, 11 on the other. The team with the ball is the offense. The team without it is the defense. Snap the ball, you run, you collide, and you tackle. But now football is much more. No longer just a game of brawn, it's also a game of brains. This is Bear Necessities.
Good morning, Barflies. This is Jordan T. Silveira, your host. Thank you once again for joining Bear Necessities. Got we're just going to try to keep it within an hour and 20 minutes today. 12:30 p.m. Pacific, of course. I'm talking my time here. Cali, West Coast, Best Coast time. Just want to make sure that we try to get you all out so that you can catch the afternoon slate of college football games, as that's a big deal. We got college football back. But thank you so much for joining. As always, we're going to talk a lot about Bears football today. Ryan Poles, who everybody knows I feel like I'm a little bit critical about Ryan Poles. I got a lot of good things to say. Chat, J-Rock, Chris Watts, Tareen, Toa, Vaughn, everybody hanging out. Let's go with it. So I'm excited to have you on. Maybe I should hit a little light on in here because I feel like you're getting all this reflection off my glasses, and that's always crappy. I don't got to get like anti-reflective lenses. But anyway, let's get into it. Dan, all you barflies are freaking awesome. I'm over here going, yeah, I don't know how many people are going to show up. It's college football, and we got the usuals in here. That's why you barflies kill it. We got J2K, we got Leo Factor. Love all you fellas. Chris Watts, my man over the pond. He's a wanker. So, I got to give you that love, Chris. But we will, like I said, we'll get into it. And, of course, as you know, all the usual plugs that I got to give, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, share with your friends, turn on the notification bell, all that good stuff that's going to help the algorithm for Barroom Network and help Aldo. As always, it wouldn't be a show. I got to start this, and as hopefully you all know, but Aldo, if you catch this, my prayers and solidarity are with you. I'm so sorry about your mother's loss. I admittedly have just been kind of going through my own emotional sweeps at the moment, but this is my escape, so we're going to talk about it. But I want you to know we're all here with you in solidarity at Barroom Network, all the Barflies. Aldo, God bless you and stay strong, as I know you're going through your own hardships and your own storm at the moment. So, pour a proverbial one out for you, and much love, Aldo. So, like I said, in the interest, and here we go, Chris. Skokes, I see you in there. Chris, don't be a wanker. So we're just gonna, like I said, shoot it for about an hour, just so that we have some content here to talk about. I'll try to keep it succinct so that you can watch college football. But as you all know, Barflies, this show is just about you as much as it is anybody. Feel free to comment. I'll try to pull things up. If you have questions, things you want to talk about, let's go through it. And talk a little bit about college football today. Talk a little bit about Ryan Poles, his recent media car wash tour that he did. Hogan Johns, the All Access podcast, his presser with Ian Cunningham. Just did a lot of meaningful talks this week. Tevin Jenkins, a topic of subject. The waiver wire, things of that sort. As you know, this is Bear Necessities. We talk about the Chicago Bears and the true necessities of it all. No fluff. So let's get into that. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a Jordan show if I didn't have to bring a little bit of the NFL in. Skokes probably saw it, and anybody else that's on Twitter, Skokes, if you want to find a way you can put it in the chat or link me or DM it, whatever, I'll put it up. But there's a tweet going around from a Vikings writer, smaller writer, and I don't say that in a negative way, or anything of that sort. I'm small fish myself, but Vikings writer that had put out that he felt Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the GM for the Vikings, had been doing a better job than people were giving him credit for, considering his recent moves. And a lot of Bears fans in this, listen, I love all you Barflies. We're all Bears fans together. I mean this sincerely. Please, as Bear fans, let's try to be nicer to each other. One thing I didn't love about it, and it's not all you Barflies, just in general, Bears Twitter, Bears fans. I don't even remember him saying anything negative about Ryan Poles in this. Just being a Vikings writer, a Vikings fan, and praising his GM, and all of a sudden the Bears fans just go for his neck, and I'll never understand that. But that's okay. We'll just make it work, and we'll do our thing there. But a little bit of talking about that. So without further ado, as I said, do all the fun stuff. I'm Jordan Silveira. You can find me there on Twitter, Aldo Barkeeper for Aldo on Twitter, Barroom Network on Twitter. If you're here, you likely already know that. So let's get to it. Of course, I put this in the description every week. If you want to contribute to Bear Necessities in any way, shape, or form, I'm always appreciative of that. I don't mind doing the show alone. As you all know, I could talk for 6 hours, but I also like to have a guest. I think that's what makes it fun. So if you ever want to join, contribute in any way, just let me know. Leo, I guess I didn't mention that, but you're spot on here. Just want to reiterate to everybody that indeed I have moved this show to Saturday morning. A little bit of a change up here. I'm trying to find the right time because obviously, and a little shout out to John Santucci and Anthony, who did the weekend sports betting show this morning. If you're at all interested in college football and bets, in getting some free, good, great information regarding where to put your money down to try to win, I cannot recommend you go watch that enough. They did an excellent job. They're also much more succinct, and brevity is their strong suit. They did it in about 30 minutes. So real easy for you to consume and figure out how you want to go about your money. But yes, as Leo talked about, I am moving my show to Saturday morning. This is going to be natural for what you'll come to expect. I want to have time to watch football on Thursday nights. And with, Bears Country podcast moving over to Monday nights, it's just one of those things where Saturday mornings are going to be the way that we go about it. So I'm probably going to say 11 a.m. Pacific time is the goal. Just a little bit of a late start this morning, as I said, trying to understand when would be the right time. And we'll try to get you out before most of the college football games start. So about an hour and a half show. Okay, done a lot of talking already, and it's getting to the point where let me go ahead and get through it. So let's move along. J2K, cheers. Thank you so much. Skokes, appreciate you being here. Vaughn, yes, every Barflies, feel free to send your love and support to Aldo on Twitter. I know he needs it right now. Tooch, thank you so much for hanging out. You did an excellent, excellent job this morning on the Bet Show, even if we don't always see eye to eye on things like Coach Fickle in Cincinnati versus Arkansas. But I certainly think you have a reason for feeling that way. But we'll save some of that as we talk about college football in a bit. Cornelius, don't be hating on my man Poles. Yeah. Tooch, I mean, if you want to hang out, you're more than welcome to. But the reason I wrote Tooch into this is Tooch is a guy that I think he and I see similarly on the Ryan Poles topic. And even he was shocked, saying, wow, did somebody hack your account? Did you change? Who are you? Because I have been somewhat critical about, I wouldn't even know if critical is the word, but skeptical. Maybe a little bit critical about the process. Why go this route instead of this route? Hey, why trade for N'Keal Harry for a 7th round pick when if you were a little more proactive, you maybe could have gotten a DJ Chark on a 1-year prove-it deal. And if he shows out with Justin Fields, just re-sign him. You found your receiver. If he doesn't, it's a 1-year deal, no problem. Doesn't hurt your cap for next year. So that's a part of the skepticism area. But this isn't about me being skeptical. I just want to give you an example of how I was feeling about the Bears and Ryan Poles. And I think, as I put on Twitter, I said, look, I'm one of the most, I think I'm a fair individual. Listen, I'm a Bears fan. I will always have that attached to me. But I also take pride in saying I try my best to be fair, to take away and strip away any bias that there may be. I try my best to call a spade, be honest about it. And so I, in many ways, had questions about the way that this team was being built. I believe they're the cheapest spent team in the league. I think at $150 million, $151. There is no team that's spending less money on their active roster. Just to give you some ideas, and yes, there's context around that. That's just a little statistic. There's context around what did Ryan Pace leave Ryan Poles, things of that sort. But all of that to say, and this kind of goes to Chris Watts' point here, Jordan, what do you think of the new players that the Bears have signed? Well, and Tooch, you're saying here, yep, to what we're talking about. I love it. Chris, that's a great question. So I guess let's start with that because this is where you're going to see what Tooch kind of said. Hey, did somebody hack your account? Are you different? I I've been riding a high really since the Chicago Bears-Browns game. I don't know how any Bears fan could not watch that preseason game and feel utterly excited about what they witnessed the team looking like. Particularly, obviously, let's not beat around the bush. It's all the Justin Fields show. But Montgomery looks like he's still the killer running back. Tevin Jenkins seems like he's all of a sudden rounding into form at right guard, and he looks like arguably the most talented offensive lineman that they have. We saw Dante Pettis show out and show up. It's Cole Kmet found his way into the end zone for a first time, and God knows how long. So it was just an immediate boost to morale. And then you have the question marks of what's going to happen, who's going to be cut, projecting the 53, things of that sort. We now have our answers. And yes, the 53 is going to consistently change. And let's, Chris, before I touch on your point, let's talk about that. To me, and this is where you're going to see me being so positive, I want the Bears and Ryan Poles to churn the bottom of this roster like they're trying their hardest to make butter. I want them to sit there and look. It should be constant. You should be able to go to NFL.com's transaction report or anywhere you find out what transactions are occurring in the league, and you should see the Bears on there every single day. Because if what Ryan Poles is saying, which I do believe him, he is saying that it's a situation where he's relentless about building out this team, then I want to see him churn it out. And, Chris, I'm going to come right back to you here, but Nick's brought up a good point. Like, what do I think about Tonga getting cut? Me too, Nick. I'm surprised by it as well. But this is an example of what I mean. As much as I'm sitting here not necessarily, I got to give – it wouldn't be me if I didn't say, look, I got to eat a little bit of crap on this. I got to eat a little crow. Danny Shimon, I took umbrage with his point that Khyiris Tonga would be cut. I took a little victory lap. If I'm going to eat the crow, Danny, which you're more than welcome to kind of serve it up, I also have to take a little victory lap. I was dancing around going, see, Danny, I told you Tonga made the 53. And admittedly, he would be on the 53 if the Vikings, which is a point we're going to get to later with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, didn't cut defensive tackle Armon Watts. And this is what I'm talking about. How can I not be fair and honest and say, this is the GM I'm hoping for. This is the GM I love. No, this is not what you want to see if you're a successful roster. If you're, the Bills, I don't think you really need to be doing this much activity, but go look back at what Brandon Beane has done. Go look at Pete Carroll and John Schneider. When they first took over the Seahawks, they had more transactions in that year than any other team, and that's what I hope you see the Bears do. This is an example of we don't sit contently. Khyiris Tonga is probably a really solid talent. I know I think that. Nick, you probably think the same. But guess what? If Armon Watts hits it and he's a better fit, it's a hard decision. I'm sorry, Tonga, but you got to go. We're bringing in Armon Watts. Oh, hey, look, we've got this Buffalo Bills defensive end. I believe he was out of Syracuse. And I love me some Charles Snowden. I think Charles Snowden's a great talent. But even I could admit he's much more of a stand-up, on-ball linebacker in a 3-4, the way that you saw Leonard Floyd or one of those joker roles, kind of a rover backer, and so doesn't necessarily fit with his hand in the dirt. Let's swap him out and bring in the undrafted rookie from Buffalo. This is what I hope that we continue to see in this season. Just churn that roster, baby. Just sit there and you have a few tentpole pieces. Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, Roquan Smith, David Montgomery, maybe an Eddie Jackson or a Jalen Johnson. Hang on to those, build around those. But let's not be frank, and let's be frank, let's not beat around the bush here. When you actually look at the Chicago Bears and see what we're dealing with, and I know it's not fun to admit this, the Bears don't have some super swath of great talent. The reason I bring this up is, let me just give you an example. It's been umpteen months since the season ended. Alec Ogletree still doesn't have a job, just had a visit with the Raiders. Deshaun Gibson signed at the very, very end of camp, right before 53-man cuts, and is on the practice squad for the San Francisco 49ers. Danny Trevathan still isn't playing. Eddie Goldman's out. Trying to think of some of the other guys. Obviously, you had a bunch of guys that just followed Ryan Pace to Terry Fontenot's post in Atlanta. Tariq Cohen, I'm super sad about his situation. He had the torn Achilles. But as you think about it, Jesse James just had a tryout for, maybe it was the Browns, but still not signed. Jimmy Graham, by all accounts, looks retired. Trying to think of some of the options. Marquise Goodwin's in Seattle. Damiere Byrd's in Atlanta. You go through that list of people. There's not a ton of talent. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, those guys are now gone. Who's there? And this goes back to my point about being a little critical about the way Ryan Poles was building it. I didn't feel like there was a ton of activity early on, and that's what really struck the angst in me. And this is what requires, and this is where I have to be positive and say I'm excited for what Ryan Poles is doing, is you let a bunch of non-talent go, plus move. Everybody's talented, so I don't want to sit there and say like I'm slandering the talent that was leaving, but clearly the league speaks for itself. There's nobody got some mega deal outside of the obvious star, Allen Robinson, who was disgruntled. Trying to think of anybody else. Obviously Khalil Mack got shipped off, but for the most part, you were sending off talent that the league speaks for itself. It hasn't demanded it. Positive move. Let's move on and try to rebuild. Okay, but who are you bringing in? Or bringing in prove-it deals, Lucas Patrick. Go ahead and bring in Justin Jones. Bring in a Tavon Young. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys. Sean Coleman, Julian Davenport, Riley Reif, Michael Schofield, Equinemius St. Brown. Okay, cool. But what are we doing? That's fine, start there, but I didn't feel comfortable saying let's roll into a season. And I put this out recently I know there's a lot of Bears fans that think the Bears are going to win week 2, and we'll see now. I don't want to say the world's changed, but I feel a little more confident about the approach because it came to a position of the Green Bay Packers defense in that secondary is arguably one of the best defenses in the league. Specifically that secondary, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage, Eric Stokes, Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Quay Walker, Devondre Campbell, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, Jerron Reed. I think that's the starters. Of course, Preston Smith, and who's your other edge now? The edge, Rashawn Gary. That's your total Green Bay defense. That defense, I would, if you want to participate in an exercise in the chat, Bears fans, as I will eventually get to, I know I'm just talking and I'm falling behind. Try to prod out any Bears offensive formation, 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 21, anything you'd like, 10 personnel, and tell me how they win against the Green Bay Packers secondary on a pass play. And that was a big concern of mine. And I think that you're at least starting to see different things take form. Let's try to pick up an Amir Smith-Marset. Let's try to bring in an N'Keal Harry. There still may be some movement coming. So to answer your question, Chris, because this has been up forever now, and I will get to the rest of the chat, what do I think of the new players? I'm pretty high on them. Part of the thing that I often get made fun of for, and I get it, is I'm Mr. Armchair GM. People get really chafed by this, but because the GM didn't select the name that you wanted, does that make them wrong? I don't think it does, but I'm allowed to. I trust my eye. I'm an amateur scout, a fanalist, but I do watch tape. I do try to understand players' talent, evaluate them. So when you say you'd pick Braxton Jones, who, guess what? And Skokes is in the chat, president of the club. I will eat a little bit of crow on that. I didn't think that Braxton Jones was a bad prospect, just that I had preferred other guys. Well, guess what? I'll be wrong on that. I will take that. At the same time, I didn't necessarily need to go grab, Trenton Gill when Ryan Stonehouse was an undrafted free agent who just replaced one of the best punters in the league in Brett Kern in Tennessee. It's okay. Trenton Gill's working out, but it comes down to this point, and this is why I have to be excited about what the Bears are doing. I liked Amir Smith-Marset coming out of Iowa. Thought he was a good player. Thought he was flashy. 5th-round pick. Totally that's worth a flyer. Armon Watts. To Nick's point here, what do I think about Tonga getting cut? I like Tonga. Thought he was a good one-tech. But you have fundamentally changed this defense around and said, we are not going to be as much of a space eater and let the backers roam around and make the plays. We are going to be an attacking downfield defense, shooting one gap. And that is what Armon Watts, Chris, back to your point, right here, that's what Armon Watts is good with. He is I think he pass rushes better than what probably people want to grade him for. He's just a more natural fit for this even front attacking defense. Not going to necessarily, we'll see. I don't want to put any cap on him, but I don't think that, and I hope Bears fans understand this, you're not getting Chris Jones or Aaron Donald, but he's certainly a talented player that should have been a starter for Minnesota and would have likely been a starter if they didn't change schemes to the Vic Fangio middle of the field open, odd front world, where you're having 3 down linemen and that body type doesn't fit. And I'm trying to, whether it's getting there or not, we're teasing to what we're going to, which is going to be the talk about the Vikings and the Bears, because it's come to this scenario where it's hard. The reality is you're actually going at the same exact pace in both of those franchises, just a different way. The Vikings, they're coming from that even 4-3 front. Mike Zimmer was the head coach. And this has been a big problem I have is I just think it hurts. And we don't even have to use the Vikings here. The Raiders are doing the same thing. I think it hurts when you draft all this talent and then a new regime comes in and goes, yeah, but those aren't my guys and they don't fit what we're trying to do. So they're worth about a bag of chips to me. So we're just going to send them out. Sure, it's good for other teams picking them up, but that bothers me. Like Wyatt Davis was a solid offensive lineman at Ohio State blocking for Justin Fields. He was your 3rd round pick last year. You ship him out. You just cut him, and now he's on a practice squad with, I think, the Giants. Chaz Surratt, North Carolina linebacker, was a really good player there, really covered up a player that's been kind of circulating in the undrafted free agent pool of Jeremiah Gemmel from North Carolina. He's now on the Jets practice squad. You just cut him. Armon Watts, similar situation. Kellen Mond, now the backup in Cleveland. So, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, so it was Amir Smith-Marset, Armon Watts, Alex Leatherwood. As much as I try to keep it fair. I'm going to eat all the crow in the world when I'm wrong. Let me do one of these for me on the Alex Leatherwood one, because I had people like resident scout Greg Gabriel, Irish Bears Show, other people trying to tell me that the Bears wouldn't take a swing on Alex Leatherwood because of the money. And I said, that's fine. Let's go ahead and see it. And sure enough, I understand. No other team wanted to take the swing. But if I'm going to pat myself on the back, let me pat proverbially Ryan Poles on the back for sitting there and saying, that's fine. Nobody else has to have confidence and believe in this guy. But I trust the staff that I've put together to build this talented player, that it's not his fault he was overdrafted at number 17 overall ahead of a guy like Christian Darrisaw, who's now looking like a solid left tackle player in Minnesota. Probably a 2nd to 3rd round guy, but super talented, came from Alabama, played left tackle there. It's the SEC, brother. Like, you're not going to sit there and play left tackle and be a Outland winner as an offensive lineman and sit there and tell me that you can't transform that into the NFL and be a solid player. So I have to give credit to Ryan Poles for saying, look, I believe in the guys that we have in the building to coach this guy up, develop him. And we're about to get 60% of the way. For those that aren't aware, 60% of his salary was already paid by the Raiders. So the Bears are on the hook for 5.9. Let's just call it 6. They're on the goodness, I'm losing my words here, but they are on the clock there for $6 million. So you have an average of $2 million a year because you have them for 3 more years. You can also now, because you picked them up off waivers, you have the ability to extend the 5th-year option for him because he was a 1st-round pick. So it's goes to a bigger point to me. And I don't know how many Bears fans, at least if they're talking about this, it's not outwardly. When you're a roster, as we've talked about, that is lacking true proven talent, I have to judge and assess as a fan every single move as, are you getting better? It really doesn't matter how much better you're getting, but are the moves that you're making improving the bottom floor of this roster upward? And I have a hard time saying that Armon Watts, the guy that had 5 sacks last year in Minnesota, and Alex Leatherwood, a guy that was a star at Alabama that clearly inspired a former regime to take him in the 1st round, to Amir Smith-Marset, who played pretty solidly at Iowa as an explosive playmaker, to Josh Blackwell, who's an athlete that was playing at Philadelphia. I'm trying to remember some of Trevon Wesco, New York Jets, a guy that had more waiver claims than anybody. These are examples of, is that guy definitively going to give me a better chance or going to be a significant upgrade than whatever we have at the back end? Can Trevon Wesco be more than James O'Shaughnessy? I'm worth doing that. hey, Tonga's a great player. I like Tonga a lot. But Tonga's, and it's a different role, different player. I understand it. Hard, different situations. But Armand Watts has produced more than Kairos Tonga at this point. I'll take it. And that's exactly how I feel about Alex Leatherwood. I understand, well, don't take him if nobody else is going to. You can sign him for your original contract. The risk is low. You're on the books for $6 million if it doesn't work out. They have over $100 million next year. Boo-hoo me if all of a sudden it doesn't work out and they're losing $6 million. And by the way, like we talked about, it's over 3 years. It's not one, but they did have to pay that out now. They had around $15 million in cap. They're paying $6 million to Alex Leatherwood. The risk is so low for what the return can be that I don't understand how any Bears fan could have been against that, Greg Gabriel included. And of course, I'm not totally trying to take shots at Greg Gabriel here, but he was a guy that said I didn't question the talent of the player, just the decision to sign him to that contract. And then I sit there and turn around and go, okay, well, tell me what the big boohoo is about spending $6 million when you have over 100 next year, when it all comes down to that basic level of, are you trying to improve the team? You are deficient in talent. And I got no response. So that's my whole point of, tell me. I love to challenge my thought process. If you disagree with me, let's hear it. So now, Chris, I now spent God knows how long talking about that topic. Let me take a drink. I'll scroll through some of the comments. We'll get through it here. But I hope that answers your question. As that's 11:21, and we are 18 minutes ahead now. Okay, Chris saying wait till the next season for big spending. Gotcha. Tooch, I agree with you. N'Keal Harry was likely signed for his blocking. I think you're seeing that a lot, whether it be Equanimeous St. Brown, Byron Pringle, N'Keal Harry. There was a play early on in preseason 1 where Dante Pettis was just driving his man down the field on one of those Khalil Herbert runs. So, yes, it's an understanding. This is the culture of, if you're going to be a wide receiver here, sure, we'll throw you the ball, but you also need to be willing to block. What receiver on this roster are people too high on, and what receiver can surprise the most? I think, on a personal level, I think people are too high on Equanimeous St. Brown. That's me. It doesn't mean I'm right. Receiver I think can surprise the most. I think, to me, I've been continuing to say, I think Dante Pettis, you go back to pedigree. I think that pedigree does mean something, whether we like to admit it or not. And sure, you can find me outliers of this player went in the first and he was never worth that. And this player went in the 7th. And if you could redraft, he'd be in the 2nd round. I get it. But Dante Pettis is a guy that I think the pedigree speaks for itself. Greg Gabriel, who I respect his scouting opinion on most things, had him pretty high written up in that draft. Kyle Shanahan, the guy that's one of the offensive geniuses of the league at the moment, obviously thought high enough of him to draft him in the 2nd round. Didn't work out because Jimmy G had been hurt multiples of those years. You had CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins playing quarterback. Then he kind of gets washed out and goes to the Giants, which we all know what the Giants have looked like over the past couple of years. I think that he's a crisp route runner. He's got speed. He's got return value. I think he can be a guy that really surprises people in the way that – I'll give you an example. We had a bunch of speedy, fast guys that were supposed to be threats and could do some returning in Damiere Byrd and Marquise Goodwin. And I feel more confident about a guy like Dante Pettis than I would have with those guys. Oh, Nick, we've talked about this. I was surprised by it too, and it's. I wish nothing but the best for Tonga. I don't know if he's landed anywhere at the moment. I don't think he has, but I hope he finds his way. Tooch, always appreciate the kind words. And then Leo, Ton just shared a photo of Fields on Instagram last night. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's entirely possible, as Nick is saying here, that Tonga may end up going to the practice squad. John, why are the Bears getting dumped on for rebuilding? Because unfortunately we live in a world where drama and negativity sells. And I mean, you want an honest opinion. I know I'm going to get cream for this. You'll never hear me tell you that the Bears are some amazing franchise. I think that they're historic. I think that they're revered for what they've done in the history of the league. But I think that they have never been considered and they haven't earned this, at least, to be one of those top flight franchises that is consistently solid and good and productive. They're not the Jets. They're not the Browns. They're not the Jaguars. They're not the Lions. They are not a bottom tier team. They're right dead smack in the middle. And I think that is the strangest part to me is there's this unwarranted hope for teams like the Lions or the Browns because they have Deshaun Watson who's suspended for 11 games. And God, even the Panthers, because they got Baker Mayfield, and it feels like for whatever reason this is an opportunity to bury the Bears for whatever reason, and it's strange. I wish I knew, but that's all right. The reason you're all here is because we've all found a way, reason or another, to find different outlets for media that talk about the things that we're interested in a different way that doesn't just imitate what you'll hear on the national side. Nick, you're saying you think Armand Watts is a great pickup. Yeah, we're going to see. I mean, talking about some of this talk about what I think about what Poles has done and my feelings on it, part of what I was trying to discuss is that he's been on this kind of media car wash. And one of the things he had said on the Hogan Johns podcast was that he was quite surprised. They assigned scouts as to be like a mock GM and who could be potentially cut from the roster. When they saw Armand Watts was cut, they had to kind of go back, run through the film, evaluate, because it wasn't somebody that they thought would be cut. And that's something that's been echoed throughout the league when he was cut, is that guy was a starter on the depth chart, was productive last year, didn't seem like he would be available. Jeremy, you're saying Kellen Diesch. Yeah, it's funny. Just because there were so many, and this is where I've been seeing a few Bears fans talk about it, it's kind of funny. It's like it's his second draft class because there were so many. Kellen Diesch to me was one of the arguably most exciting pickups because, Jeremy, like you're saying, I was pretty high on him. I saw some fourth-round mocks with him, for example. Very athletic guy, good foot speed, played at Texas A&M before moving to ASU his final year, to get his doctorate or his master's degree. And 6'7", long guy. I know Greg Gabriel's talked to him about he's got under 33-inch arms. I think it's 32 3/4. It's not ideal. But I thought that for this zone offensive scheme, there was not much better for it in the sense of what he could provide. And I was shocked to see that he went undrafted. And this is kind of just par for the course. The Miami Dolphins had all of my favorite guys, from Tanner Connor to Kellen Diesch to Zaquandre White to Verone McKinley. They picked up all of the guys that I thought should have been drafted in the undrafted pool. And this is just par for the course where you can't keep them all. And Kellen Diesch, I actually feel like he would have been a player that they would have probably tried to keep back as a developmental player. And this is the beauty. And this goes to what Ryan Poles is selling, what Ian Cunningham is selling, what Chris Morgan can sell. Kellen Diesch, when he is cut, he has an option to go wherever he wants. And most of the time, let's be clear, when you're undrafted or you're cut and you hear these players that just go back to the practice squad, I'll give you an example, Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas is a veteran who got cut with all these waiver wires. And at this point in the calendar, he didn't probably have many other options. And the Bears said, would you like to come back on the practice squad? You know the system, you know the scheme. We'll elevate you if we need a linebacker, but we've got other talent and guys like Sterling Weatherford and Jack Sanborn and Roquan Smith. Kellen Diesch is absolutely a talent that I have no doubt in my mind the Dolphins probably would have liked to pick him up, a few other zone schemes, because this is the flavor of the month in offensive schemes. And this goes back to me giving Ryan Poles credit. I think he should be doing a big victory lap at the moment, because while no games have been won, I'm watching the process show to be good. Kellen Diesch likely could have gone anywhere, and for whatever reason, he picks to take his practice squad contract from Chicago as opposed to Miami or anywhere else. It's solid. It's one of my favorite pickups. And Sterling Weatherford was a name I didn't get to talk about earlier, Chris. I'll fill you in on that. Sterling Weatherford was a guy to me that was – I don't like saying this because I know some people get chafed by the fact that I say it's like a budget or a discount version. I'm not saying that they are necessarily an incredibly lesser version, or even sometimes it's just a matter of name value. Sterling Weatherford played safety at Miami of Ohio. Kyle Hamilton played safety at Notre Dame. Clearly, I'm going to tell you that Sterling Weatherford is the budget version, maybe not even for skill set, but just because of the name of where he's playing. Everybody watches Notre Dame football. People are going to come across Kyle Hamilton's name. He shoots up the board, where a guy like Sterling Weatherford, Dominic Robinson, for example, doesn't get the same level of pub that other SEC rushers do. And so to me, Sterling Weatherford was a guy that, if you go look at the testing numbers, had incredibly similar testing results to Kyle Hamilton, my number one prospect in the draft. Baltimore Ravens picked him, I think it was at 14th or something of that sort. Somewhat of a limited player if you're asking him to be a all-around safety, center fielder, change his hip direction, fly to different areas. He's not Earl Thomas, but he's Jaron Kearse. He's Cam Chancellor. He can play dimebacker, big nickel. I probably don't want him on a slot player, but he can erase any tight end. He can fit the run really well. He's very instinctive. That was what I saw with Kyle Hamilton. And with Sterling Weatherford, I think you're getting a lot of those same traits, same play styles, same role. And now and this is where we'll see if that's what Kyle Hamilton becomes. The Ravens are going to try and trot him out at safety, where when Chris Ballard got Sterling Weatherford, and clearly I think you're seeing this with Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, they've already said, no, you don't have the long speed as a safety. We want you closer to the box anyways. Why don't you just play linebacker? And so Sterling Weatherford was also a name I was really excited about. Bear, yes, sir. Bear Truth, Bear Down. Cali time, my other California watcher and viewer. Dorn Shaver, pedestal surprise, all wide receiver and better. Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, Dorn, I think that's the guy I'm excited most about. Leo, you're asking, is Tonga really not good at penetrating? So the difference is that penetration occurs in different ways in football. So he is a bigger player that is a massive force and can hold guys up, but is going to be by the nature more of a space eater, a guy that demands double teams, which then allows players in the second level linebackers or other linemen to come and clean up the work because he is creating an advantage theoretically for other players. If I, Kairos Tonga, am commanding two people blocking me, that means that you, Dominic Robinson, or you, Robert Quinn, should have a one-on-one or even less than. You don't have to have a back coming up and chipping you, things of that sort. You should have a free path. And that is in the way what I thought his value was. Where to your point, Leo, what you're asking, is he really not good at penetrating? He's not the same player that an Armon Watts is or a Justin Jones is, where Tonga's game is not explosive. It's strong, it's powerful, but it's not quick. It's not, I mean, really, I use the word explosive because that's about the right word for it, where you'll watch guys like Armon Watts and Justin Jones explode off the ball, keep their pads low, be really quick and reactive in their moves. They are just more electric in their play as opposed to a guy like Tonga who has his own value, but in the respect to Tonga versus Watts, they don't play the same way. And so what it came down to is we're going to cut a 1 tech for a 3 tech. You're saying he's a good size, shown to be explosive. Could he have been developed to be more of a penetrating? Well, that's the thing is, I mean, sure, you can try. It goes back to the argument of like salmon swimming upstream. Do we want to work hard or do we want to work smart? I guess you could spend 18 hours trying to coach up Tonga to be a more penetrating defensive tackle, to be explosive. Or I can just go get that guy that already is that and then let Tonga go be a natural 3-down odd front player at nose tackle and ask him to put the weight back on and be that space eater and take up blocks. Chris, you're saying you don't think we have premium talent, but you think the coach. Yeah, Chris, I agree. Look, this is the part is there was a question recently that came out of what's more important, talent, coaching. And the truth is that's why it's a good question is talent and coaching need to marry each other to get the best results. But and I don't anticipate a lot of people will agree with me because I don't think it's necessarily the narrative that works for the Bears at the moment. But I certainly agree with you, Chris. I think coaching does make a difference. But I also think that just plain, you can only have one or the other. I think talent matters more than coaching. And the only reason I say that is, yes, I can concede that coaching will completely sink talent. But I also understand that I think at a base level, if I can just get somebody who's decent, competent, not directly taking away from it, like Matt Nagy, for example, at the end of the day, you can coach up whatever you want. But there's always going to be that Aaron Donald or that play where it breaks down and I've got to ask my talent to win. I've got to ask, Justin Fields to pull off the San Francisco 49ers run where the play call's crap or it breaks down, the blocks aren't good, and he finds a way to turn it into magic. And so that's why I certainly agree with you, Chris. I think that the coaching is going to raise the floor up dramatically. What the issue is that I don't think that coaching necessarily raises the ceiling. It brings the floor up, which is absolutely what you need in this team. But the talent is what really allows you to raise the ceiling. And I think that's the issue at the moment, if I had to break it down. Jeremy Sampedis was a good signing. Very curious to see our starters versus starters. Yes, that's definitely going to be an interesting thing. And I can't wait as we get ready to play the 49ers here in a few, 10 or so days? I guess it's 8 days until the season. J-Rock saying you like Pettis and Fields. Should take off after 2 years. I hope. I mean, New York has been a mess for the last couple of years under Dave Gettleman and the coaching staff they had there with Joe Judge and Ben McAdoo. So we'll see. Tyke Tolbert knows Dante Pettis. There's a reason why he ended up in Chicago, and I think that Tyke Tolbert, he understands what Tyke Tolbert as the wide receivers coach is looking for, and I'm sure that Tyke Tolbert understands what he's getting in Dante Pettis, and I think that's a reason why he's stuck around on this roster. Pulls is on the ball. Yes, sir, Bob. You're happy what happens in the regular season is all new in our 20. Yes, sir. I agree. To be braggadocious, you had Pickens, Emerson, and Lucas as your first three. Yes, sir, Jeremy. It's funny. Yeah, Abraham Lucas has looked killer. Martin Emerson has looked like a really solid outside boundary corner, and then George Pickens may be the steal of the draft just in comparison to what he's looked like early on in camp and the stories about him. And then you compare where he was drafted. Now, of course, there was real concerns about off-the-field issues and his personality, but I certainly agree. It's looked good. Cornelius, you're saying you love Poles' latest waiver pickup, especially Weatherford and Kellendish. Yes, sir. I totally agree. Watts has not been discussed much as run, tackling, D-lineman. Talk about that, please. You're saying Armon Watts has not been discussed much as a run defender and tackling. Okay, well, I assume what you're saying is more of like the Kairos Tonga role. And so the one tech, the guy that's really effective at playing the run. My opinion is that part of what this defense calls for, and this isn't some new thing, this is older defense. You go back and look at Monty Kiffin, who really kind of started it out, is that this is an attacking even front defense. Single gap, you play the run to the pass. Like, we're just trying to get upfield and be disruptive. So that was the whole, I'll give you an example. I was not a fan of the Ogunjobi signing when they were trying to do that, because I saw a guy that wasn't good in the run game and was so focused on getting upfield and causing mayhem that he'd let draws and other things blow past him. And I was like, why are we spending this much money on a guy that's going to play that way? So, Bob, to your point, yes, Armon Watts isn't going to be that stout run defender who's holding his gap and really forcing the ball to a certain way and corralling to it. He's a guy that's looking to shoot upfield, cause mayhem, and if it does slip by him, he's hoping on the backers to fill and spill that to really clear it up. And I hope that answers your question, Bob. What are the thoughts on the Minnesota wide receiver we signed? ISM is what you'll probably hear most people call him, or Amir Smith-Marset, an explosive player. It's funny because I understand that this comp doesn't really make a lot of sense to a lot of people. Jeremy, the guy I thought that I noticed when I was watching Amir Smith-Marset come out was Tyler Johnson, a guy that I was actually hoping the Bears would have had a chance to pick up on waivers. He went to the Texans as a guy that the Texans had a higher waiver priority than the Bears, so he went to the Texans. He's a guy that's about 20 pounds bigger, so I know that's where it doesn't quite track. Where I think the way I see it, though, is they're both pretty smooth route runners, where Smith-Marset, because he's 20 pounds lighter, he has a little more explosiveness, can be used on end arounds, reverses, throw him screens, let him be explosive in that manner with his speed and his agility and his elusiveness. And so he's got return value. He's I don't want to say a gadget guy. I think, and this is the thing, is Tooch, I don't know if you're still here. Tooch is an Iowa fan. Iowa is an interesting program that I don't think that they necessarily put their wide receivers in the best spot to really show off their skill set. So I think when it came out, there was a belief that, he's just this gadget guy, just get the ball in his hands and he'll make plays, kind of a Velus Jones style. And I think that, yes, while he only had 5 receptions last year in Minnesota, when you watch him play, it looks a little more complete than that. I'm not telling you he's Odell Beckham Jr. or anything of that sort, or Cooper Kupp. But I think that he's a guy that is explosive, has juice, can be a returner, pretty solid route runner. We'll see how long it takes for him to pick up the playbook and build rapport with Justin Fields. But it's this is what I'm talking about. Is it worth it? You have an extra spot on your roster, 52 people. You need to fill it with somebody. You're down on bodies in the wide receiver room. Tajay Sharp's out for the year. Byron Pringle, we don't know how he's doing. Velus Jones, we need to get bodies in here. Sure, I'd rather take a flyer on him than look, the reality is I know that Denzel Mims is a guy I'm high on. Terrace Marshall, Robbie Anderson. Yeah, but you're going to have to send a pick to get those guys. And anybody else that's worthwhile, I guess you could have signed like an Auden Tate. But I also think something we've seen in this offense, and I don't necessarily think what I think about it matters. But as much as I've thought that big arm of Justin Fields needs a big body to pin it to in an X receiver, a guy that wins at the catch point, and that's how I feel, I also can concede that it's entirely possible that the Chicago Bears feel that doesn't matter. Let's just get Justin Fields, who, to be quite frank, didn't work with those guys at Ohio State. There wasn't some 6'4" big ball winner. It was Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., who's also there now. There hasn't been a guy that's this huge body. And what Justin Fields shows is that when he gets to the red zone, yes, that's when he's going to pin it to his big bodies. You saw it with Horsted. You saw it with Jesse James. You saw it with Cole Kmet. You saw it with Luke Farrell at Ohio State, with Jeremy Ruckert at Ohio State. So I think that there's an understanding of let's use these quick, explosive, athletic route runner guys and have him stretch the field with them, have him pin it on them. And then if we get to a point where we get in the red zone, then we'll just utilize those big bodies. But we don't need that big body out there as a Denzel Mims or a Terrace Marshall, for example. Toa, 7 guys we picked up are better than Detroit Lions. I don't even know if he's here, but Don Burr, that is. I think the Detroit Lions are actually building the right way, and I'm fair about that. If you want my honest opinion about the Lions, I think that the way that they're building is in many ways how I wish the Bears had built, but I understand doing it that way, you are conceding certain things. Let's be clear, Justin Fields is worth more than Penei Sewell every day of the week, but I also don't know how much better you are drafting Justin Fields and then asking 40-year-old Jason Peters and Larry Borum and hurt Tevin Jenkins to be his protector. Whereas what the Lions are doing is slow playing it, because this is the thing too. When you take Justin Fields, your clock, your hourglass immediately flips over and the clock starts ticking on. You've got 4 to 5 years of a cheap quarterback, wins the championship window opening. The Lions didn't want to do that. The Falcons didn't want to do that. So they went and they said, we'll take Kyle Pitts, a rare talent. We'll take Penei Sewell, a potential franchise tackle. We'll strengthen that offensive line. We're going to build up the whole team around what will be a quarterback that we either acquire or we drop in. They may trade for a Kyler Murray, or they may go, look, we're going to draft CJ Stroud or Tyler Van Dyke or Will Levis or one of these guys. And then we're going to put them in there and go, look, you've got Jamison Williams. You've got a good offensive line. You've got TJ Hawkinson. You've got DJ Chark and Amon-Ra St. Brown. The defense is going to get after him. We've got waves of defensive linemen. So I certainly think that the Detroit Lions are building it in a way that I can admire, but I also don't quite understand this hope and amazement of what they're doing. I need to see it first. I'm watching them in the preseason. Say what you want about the Chicago Bears and their talent level. I'm watching the Chicago Bears rattle off a 3-0 preseason while I'm watching the Lions stumble and win 1 out of 3. And I think they went 1-2, lost to the Steelers, lost to the Falcons, and then won by a single point against the Colts on a 2-point conversion. So I need to see it with a team like Detroit. Nick, you're saying Pace goes for Tonga. Yeah, certainly. They are now playing that 3-4, so it certainly makes sense. That's somewhere he could fit, and they obviously Ryan Pace liked him. You see that we can sit back and have a lot of questions. We see very good. And they said, yeah. No, and Bear Truth, that's the point, is I want to be very clear, because I know that, like I said, that topic chafes people when they're, oh, you're an armchair GM. Who are you to say that he's doing bad or not? I'm not, especially at this point in the calendar. I don't think you can definitively say anything about who Ryan Poles is or this regime until the results have rolled in. I think what you're allowed to do as a spectator on the outside, though, is go, as you said, I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't know what the thought process was behind that. Maybe that's not what I would have done. Or, yes, I approve of that. I think that's a good move. Made a lot of sense in my opinion because of what I thought of this player. But if you're sitting here saying this GM or this person, this coach is bad at this point in the calendar, or is definitively, holistically a great hire, I think that's way too premature in my opinion. Till you're saying media acts like we played with A-Rob, Max, Hick, etc. Unless you get 6-11 teams that are improved. Yeah, to me, like I said, I think that the floor is going to rise, which is why when people say they're going to be a bottom 5 team, maybe picking top 3, I don't know if I'm going to tell anybody they're going to win 11 games, but I certainly don't think it's the bottom is 6. I think that they'll win a few more. Okay. And then, Nick, you're saying you don't understand the media made it seem like they're dropping 30-year-old D linemen. Yeah. Well, so here's the thing that's funny is like Mac is certainly healthy now. It looks like Akeem Hicks looks healthy. And I certainly think that those teams that got them are going to be happy, just like I think the Rams are going to be happy with Allen Robinson. But the reality is that those guys, and this is why situation is everything. When you look around the league and you look at other teams and how they're building, you need to look at where you're at on the timeline. The Falcons are not competing right now. They're trying to build up a talent-efficient team, clear the books. They've got a ton of dead cap from the Matt Ryan trade. They're going to maybe see what they have in Desmond Ridder, see what Arthur Smith can pull a rabbit out of his hat, get the defense under Dean Pease some more help. I love Dean Pease. The Bears clearly trying to, as Ryan Poles said it himself, I have to build this team up, not just build it around Justin Fields. Bills, they're trying to acquire Von Miller for a massive contract to try to push the car over the finish line. The Broncos are sitting there saying, we're going to plug Russell Wilson in and see if we can compete. Devontae Adams getting traded to the Raiders. Like, this is what you're seeing. So, to your point, Nick, I mean, this is the context that I think the national media may lack is, yes, on the surface, trading Khalil Mack for a second-round pick, I wasn't super happy. I wish that we could have got more, but I also have to assume that, look, when you're asking somebody to take on that contract for a guy that's been injured, you're not going to get more than a second-round pick. And then Akeem Hicks, who's a guy that's been hurt but is incredibly productive, and then you have to play it with other teams. They're looking at it, same thing. He's an injury concern. He requires this very specific scheme where, look, he's got a specific role. He's not a sexy player. Akeem Hicks is a wonderful player. I actually thought he was more at the heart of the Chicago Bears defense than Khalil Mack ever was. But he doesn't play that sexy edge position. And then you have teams saying, I'm not going to sit there and concede what could be a compensatory pick for this guy. I'll just wait. And the Bears have no interest, there's no real incentive to retain a Khalil Mack or an Akeem Hicks when you have to understand your timeline and understand Khalil Mack's 30, Akeem Hicks is 32, 33. By the time we're ready to go, they may be 32, 34, things of that sort. What are we doing? We're just wasting away their time, which is where the whole Robert Quinn issue came up. Is he going to be okay staying here? Because they're not going for much this year. Good for healthy Bear thoughts production. Yep. Certainly Bear truth. Youth was the way to go. They can't make up their minds. Let me take a drink. Here's Jeremy saying Weatherford was a consistent. Yeah, I mean, Weatherford was a guy that I thought would have got drafted. Yeah. I don't know if there's a pun in there, Jeremy, but I'll just act like you're being serious. Nothing about penetration any other way. Get their big names, but for you personally, you need more than name value to make someone worth it. Yeah, well, and that's Nick. I mean, so it sounds like you're right there on the Ryan Poles train, because Ryan Poles is the guy that came out and said, I'm not here to acquiesce to the fans or the public demand to go get a name just because the name is OBJ and it's 3 letters, or to go acquire Calvin Ridley because that's name value. I'd rather just try to build it the way I want to build it and not put the team in a negative position. And I mean, to your point, Nick, like, this is part of the issue, is that a guy like Ryan Pace, at a certain point, he had to keep doubling down because it was his job. So if you are at a position where you understand that if I don't do everything in my power to gamble and take a chance and double down and go all in, I'm certainly not going to maintain my job. I will be kicked out. So if that's the circumstances that I know I'm under, then I might as well just push it all forward and double down and go all in, all in, all in, and see if I can strike a jackpot that resets my timeline and I can hit. And that's what he was trying to do. I'll trade up. I'll get Justin Fields. Maybe he'll pop like Justin Herbert in his first year. That'll reset my timeline. I'll sign all these ridiculous contracts, like Jimmy Graham still getting paid on this year's cap. Andy Dalton still getting paid on this year's cap. Danny Trevathan. I'll do all these things to try and buy me a little more time. And that's where you're seeing Ryan Poles take the opposite. Like, I don't have any rush. I just started. We're going to strip it down. I've told George this is what we're going to do. And we're going to let the chips fall where they may. And we'll see what happens. If Ryan Poles isn't successful, then I certainly think at one point or another, you'll start to see some very similar actions where you're pushing, trying to buy yourself more time. It's like you're trying to shovel water out of a boat as quick as you can, not realizing that as you're pushing that bucket down, you may be chipping away at the boat every time you do it. So it's interesting. That's why I think team building and talking about GMs is just, it's unique to see how do you run a franchise. And Nick, you're saying Mac was on, I presume you're saying he was only good in 2018. Hicks was great when he's out there barely. Yeah, A-Rob is great, but I also think that he was disgruntled and clearly not playing with full gusto. Definitely not right. Yeah. And then go along. It's both, Jordan, you need the talent, but you also need proper coaching. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Nick. I mean, the reality here is that you really do need both of those to marry to get the best result. But if in some odd world where it's like you got to pick one or the other, like, hey, peanut butter or jelly, well, damn, if they just both come together, it's a pretty good sandwich. But in this odd world of, look, you can only have one. I don't necessarily think there's a right answer because, as we said, you really need both to work. But if it was me, gun to my head, I would tell you that I think talent matters more. Sorry, I know I'm trying to catch up here. It's Getsy can call some full-time plays this year to cover for a lack. Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, Jeremy, that's possible. Good coaching makes a guy like Mustafa a competent player versus absolutely raising the floor. I don't think I'm ever going to tell you that Sam Mustafa is Ryan Jensen or Alex Mack. But again, if you're raising the floor, yeah, all of a sudden Sam Mustafa becomes a competent player. You're saying Tonga's definitely explosive off the ball, but he's not agile. Like, yeah, that's all. I mean, explosive is a funny term because to me, explosive is a guy that's almost electric in his movement. He's very kinetic, as you say, agile. Where, yeah, explosive 2 can also be this brick shithouse guy that's like the ball snapped, and he's just bench pressing guys off of him. So it comes in different ways. Was the last one off the snap. You really like his game. Didn't see the first down. I get you, Jeremy. Very confused how we did so well with the waiver wire. So many teams wanted the guys we took. Well, Jeremy, that's the whole point, is that when you're looking at the waiver wire, don't get me wrong, they weren't first, which goes back to my whole point of media should stop saying that they're going to have the first pick. They weren't first. I think they were 7th. So just considering the odds, you're in the top 25% chances. So I guess forgive me, this is why I'm not a math guy. So I guess that would presume that you're in the top 75% percentile of where you're at in the selection process. The reason I get to that is 32 divided by 4 is 8 teams. I think they were 7th or 8th. So you're in that first quarter of players, of opportunities to select a player. You are ahead of most of the teams that may be interested, which is why a Trevon Wesco lands to you. All you're asking for is that the 6 or 7 ahead of you don't select those. So I think that's really how they got so lucky. Tell me in college. Yeah, I mean, this is, Leo, to your point, though, everybody sees the game a little differently. Justin Fields a clean pocket, better than the receivers are. Well, and Squalls, I tend to agree with this, by the way. I do think that, and this is not some epiphany, I think that most quarterbacks, if you just give them time, they'll carve you up. It's the idea, that's why rushers are so important, is can you allow them to not have time? Can you put them under duress? Okay. Yeah, well, let's keep moving along as I'm trying to catch up. Leno stunk. He was just a body. I don't know. Nick, I differ a little bit on Charles Leno. Not that I think he's an amazing player, but I certainly don't agree with the move to keep Jimmy Graham over him, especially in hindsight, knowing that now. I watched the guy sit there and get a contract to remain in Washington. So we go along. Tell me we can play one tech in this defense. Yeah. But this is the thing, J2K, is as good as Tonga could be a one-tech, I also don't think Mike Pennell is a bad one-tech option. So they got him for veteran league minimum salary and said, we can let a guy like Tonga go for a more valuable player in the interior defensive line. The 3-tech supersedes the 1 technique in this defense. If we can shed a bottom-of-the-roster 1 technique for a potential upside boom player at the 3-tech, we can just fill that 1 tech with Mike Pennell or Angelo Blackson, who's more of a versatile guy. Bagman for not loafing. Alrighty. Well, and Cornelius, I obviously agree with you. I don't think that Chicago is a 3-win team, and I think they're going to be a tough out. I've said that numerous times. I think they're going to require teams to pack a hard hat, pack a lunch. Otherwise, you're going to get punched in the mouth with this culture, with this hits philosophy, the way that they play ball. And this isn't some Eberflus epiphany. This goes back to Lovey. It goes back to Dungy, the way that Colts defense was flying around with Robert Mathis and Gary Brackett, and all those guys back in the day. Dwight Freeney, Bob Sanders, Tracy Porter. Was he one of them? At one point, I think he was a Colt, but I know he was a Saint. All right. Let's go here. Let's see where. Pace would have thrown a bag at Armstead. Yeah, that's that's the difference. When your timeline's different, you make different decisions. Notorious, you're saying you're excited for Amir Smith-Marset, myself as well. They really put Edwards complaining on being tired. Yeah, it's funny. Leo, I guess we could talk a little bit about that, who the cuts were. I didn't necessarily think anybody was too shocking other than Mario Edwards, but in some ways you look at that and you say it was going to be one of two things. We like him so much and understand he's a veteran. And I do think that you saw that in 1920 is that Eberflus was talking to Mario Edwards and was saying, like, just go hard today. And then, it sounded like he was saying that he'd hint that you'll have a vet day tomorrow. Like, give me 100% today. I know it's going to be tough, but you'll be able to rest and relax and recuperate tomorrow on your vet day. And so it was going to be one of two things with a guy like Mario Edwards. He's either not playing because he's secured a roster spot, they love him, and they got big plans for him, or he's not playing because they don't have any plans for him. And he's either injured, loafing, not a fit, trying to trade him, disgruntled, things of that sort. And clearly we saw that at the end of the day, it wasn't something that they were planning for. And then, Nick, you're saying explosive is a mix of power and speed. First step wasn't where it needs to be. Absolutely. And then Cornelius, I guess we can talk a little bit about this. Tevin Jenkins is going to make the O-line so much better because every week he gives a clinic on how to finish blocks. Yeah, that was interesting to me. And I certainly – GMs can lie. Anybody can lie. But I really believe that at the end of the day, I have to give a little bit of credence to what Ryan Poles was saying when he had said, I believe it was on the Hogan Johns podcast, that when the Tevin Jenkins rumors were coming out, they were coming out and substantiated by Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo because he was not calling anybody. He wasn't picking up the phone and going, look, I'm trying to trade Tevin. But stories pass around the league of, hey, this second-round pick that a lot of people had in the back end of the first round in many of their mocks from last year, clearly very talented and a special athlete at the tackle position or at the offensive line position, is not practicing. There may be some smoke and fire there. Is he disgruntled? Is he not a fit? Let me call Ryan Poles and say, will you take a seventh? Will you take a sixth? And I don't fault Ryan Poles at all. Your job is to pick up the phone and answer and go, no, not a seven, no, not a six. So did you just say a second-round pick? Yeah, I'll trade a second or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, when the moment you pick up the phone and you even listen, it becomes a scenario where Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo and the rest of them can say, well, all of a sudden he's engaged in trade talks. And sure, by all technicalities, it's a trade talk, but you're just simply picking up the phone and hearing an offer. So it's unique in that way. Okay, so I have about 15 minutes here because I want to make sure I get you all out with college football starting up here at 12:30. I guess I can start by I'll go quickly through the college football season kind of being upon us. I'm excited for that. I know, as I said earlier, if you're at all interested in betting, Tooch did a show just kind of going all over all the games. I'll approach it from a little bit different of a view, more of a I'm always scouting for different prospects and quite a few interesting games so far. One, I guess we'll talk about the topical issue of the University of Michigan. They are doing a bit of a unique thing where they have two quarterbacks. One is Cade McNamara, the guy that led them to the playoffs last year. And then they have, I believe it's J.J. McCarthy. That is the Illinois kid, very great athlete, unique prospect. Jim Harbaugh has decided to play McNamara in game one and start him. And then game two, McCarthy starts. And then I think they both do a half at game three, or maybe the starter gets named at game three. It's a little bit of a unique scenario that I don't think I've seen in a while, but that is the situation there. So McNamara was playing today. Chris, thanks for hanging out. I'm sure it's very late where you are. Outside of that, Josh Downs, a player I'm really high on, University of North Carolina, is not playing today, but he had a 2-touchdown performance last week. He is a speedster. If anybody's at all interested, I did a thread on him a while back. I'll try to retweet it. But an electric player. You want to talk about not really the Deshaun Jackson guy, but it's freaky that way. He has got multiple firecrackers on his back, just like a jetpack. And so he had a good play. TCU won. No big plays from the corners, Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson or Noah Daniels. Quinn Ewers and Bijan Robinson are playing today for Texas. I'm excited to watch them. I'm trying to think of any other big ones. Northwestern picked up a win. Peter Skoronski looks very good against Nebraska. Don Burr, yes, sir. Go Blue, Michigan. I guess we're going to see what Jim Harbaugh does, as I said, with McNamara and McCarthy. Let me look here. I had go through some of the games that were going up. So as we look, Florida State won. Micah Pittman is a guy that is the son of Michael Pittman, the running back from the Bucks, brother of Michael Pittman Jr. for the Colts. Micah Pittman is there in Florida State. Didn't do anything in week one that was that significant. As I said, Josh Downs was the big showcase for me. Storm Duck, slot corner there, had a pick. He's a guy that I thought may have come out last year. So two players I would tell you to watch from North Carolina Tar Heels are the wide receiver Josh Downs. Storm Duck is their corner in the back end. Virginia Tech lost in a game, which I thought was somewhat unique. Let me see, who were they playing? It was a shocking one. They had actually lost to the Old Dominion Monarchs 17-20. So not what you want to see there. Moving along, talked about TCU a little bit. West Virginia had played Pittsburgh. That is Keaton Slovis, quarterback that transferred from USC, and JT Daniels, quarterback that transferred from Georgia. Slovis's team, the Pittsburgh Panthers, won it. Other interesting game last night was Penn State. I guess I'll probably close it up on that one, at least with college football talk. Joey Porter Jr. Joey Porter, his father, famous linebacker that played with the Steelers, the Cardinals, and then coached with the Steelers at the end of his career. His son, Joey Porter Jr., is a corner that I thought was going to be coming out of Penn State last year. Decided to stay in school to try to raise his draft stock. He had a killer game. Don't believe he allowed a catch, had like a few breakups. Joey Porter Jr. is a guy that I would suggest keeping your ear to the ground on. I think he'll be a big name that comes up as we get closer to draft season in 4 or 5 months. Jeremy, you're saying you don't get a lot of time to watch college football, but who do you have to watch at 3 Tech? That's a great question. Well, the one that, if you want like teach tape, Jeremy, of a guy that's like going to make you ooh and ah over 3 Tech tape, it's Jalen Carter, number 88 for the Georgia Bulldogs. So Will Anderson is your defensive end, one of the most talented prospects I've seen in years, because he is Bosa, Miller, Chase Young. He's all those guys with all of their moves combined. Will Anderson, Alabama, defensive end, is a killer. He's an awesome player. And then you have Jalen Carter, who's a 3 Tech teach tape guy. You have Miles Murphy, Clemson, decent 3 Tech option. Brian Brissy, Clemson. Going through other 3 Tech options. Kalijah Cansey at Pittsburgh, who's actually he's a different player. I don't even necessarily think he'd be like a guy that the Bears are after, but he is much more of that shorter build, a 6-foot defensive tackle, but explosive. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question, Jeremy. It's awesome to see. 2 offensive linemen building a roster. To me, that's a big deal. Ian Cunningham, Ryan Poles. If I put out recently that if Ryan Poles does nothing else correct, nothing, if he just simply fixes the offensive line and then nothing else goes right, I still think that you'd see much more success than you've ever seen the Bears have, just because when you consider what offensive line success does for teams, they are consistently better, which I'm sure Don, who's in the chat, is going to love this, because this is the truth. When I think about the Raiders back when they had Gabe Jackson, Kelechi Osemele, and was Colton Miller there at the time, Donald Penn, you think about what the Packers have consistently built, the Ravens had built, the Cowboys under the Zeke and Dak year when they were rookies of the year, that offensive line, when you have a good offensive line, your team is consistently relevant. And so if these 2 guys, Ian Cunningham and Ryan Poles, do nothing else right but create a solid offensive line, I think we as Bears fans will be happy. Jeremy said makes it roll next year with picks and money. Yep, it's going to be interesting. Toe always sparring with Don Burr here. He's Don, answer me on this. Did you go to University of Michigan again, or are you a Chippewa? And then, Toe, you bring up a good point here. Kelechi Osemele did meet with Poles for a workout. That is probably, if anybody follows me on Twitter, it's something I'm like daydreaming about. I'm just going to try to continue to manifest it because I don't necessarily think Kelechi Osemele is a guy that will start by any means, but he's a culture guy. Something that Ryan Poles said that I thought was really important this week was during his presser, he had said that Riley Reef is a guy that was brought in to certainly play if he can prove he's worth it and is better than the young lineman, and he needs to remain ready. But he's also been in the league for a while and understands what it is to be a professional, and so he's just as much of a culture and glue guy as he is a guy that needs to be a swing tackle and be ready to play. And to me, what Kelechi Osemele would be is that exact same role, just for the guard, the young guards, Zach Thomas, Ja'Tyre Carter, Tevin Jenkins, Alex Leatherwood, if he becomes a guard. I guess one thing I'll talk about here that I meant to talk about, it's kind of lost steam since he was picked up, but Alex Leatherwood, a lot of people are going, is he going to be a tackle or guard? I think we'll see. I certainly think that you try him at tackle, but my biggest thing is I don't want the Bears to rush anything with Alex Leatherwood. I want to make sure that he's on a very clear development plan, builds his confidence back, sticks to one position. They're working on his technique. And I mean it when I say if this year is simply a redshirt year for him, where he is just trying to strip it down to the basics and build it up, I think that Alex Leatherwood would be much better for it. The Bears would be much better for it. And I don't even necessarily, if I'm being quite frank, I don't think it has to take a whole year. I watched the Bears essentially strip Justin Fields down to the studs this last offseason and work on the footwork, work on the timing, work on the pocket presence, work on his arm motion, his delivery, all of that, his cadence. You watch them completely strip down Justin Fields, and I'm not saying it all happens in a day, and there's plenty of room to grow, but they were able to rebuild him up to be a more complete player than whatever bad habits he had built under Matt Nagy. And I think that Chris Morgan, if he's worth his salt, and apparently it would seem that way with what he's getting out of Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins as a guard, and Larry Borum's looking okay, and Sam Mustipher looks better, then all of a sudden, if he's worth his salt, he should be able to strip Alex Leatherwood down for just the pure talent and then rebuild him in this reclamation project to become hopefully what his true potential is. And of course, Jeffrey McLaughlin here throwing shots at Don just for prison for the folks that didn't leave. Pole's definitely not leaving no stone unturned. Yeah, no, you're right, Cornelius, and that's what we're excited for, is seeing what happens there. Okay, with 5 minutes to go, I guess I will quickly. It's never going to be 5 minutes when I'm talking about it because I love team building, but I guess we'll talk a little bit about NFC North division rival, the Vikings, a little bit. The Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah he was a guy that interviewed for let's back up a little bit. He was a former second in command under Andrew Berry in Cleveland. He's a Stanford guy, I believe, or some very high educational school. Was previously with the 49ers, kind of worked his way up there. Then when Andrew Berry got the job in Cleveland, I believe he came from Philadelphia, he ended up picking up Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to be his second in command. Kwesi gained some traction this year, actually interviewed for the Bears job amongst others. I was actually very high on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. I think that a guy that comes from that different background can provide a unique insight into team building that could be fresh for a new team. And I don't know if what I was originally campaigning for, if the Bears had money to throw around, would have been bringing in a veteran like Rick Smith, who knows how to build a team, and then having if you can find a creative way to steal Kwesi away and make him a second in command. But the whole idea when you do this in the NFL is I have to give somebody a promotion. So I don't know what that would have been, but I still thought Kwesi would have been maybe a number 2 guy that could develop into a true number 1 GM. And for those that I'm sure most of us are aware, but Kwesi Adofo-Mensah ended up getting the job in Minnesota because Ryan Poles was going for a finalist position there. Stopped in at Chicago first. George McCaskey picked him at the airport, sealed the deal. He never made it to Minnesota, which then led to the Vikings picking up Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and then waiting for the head coach McConnell after the Rams. And so just wanted to kind of briefly touch about this. because I just think it's been interesting as somebody who's been observing how the Vikings are building it and versus what Brian Poles is doing. I've told everybody I've been a little bit critical in some ways about how the Bears have built this. I have to admit I'm a little bit shocked and I don't want to say disappointed. No, but we have to see results. But I am not so sure that I love the way that the Vikings are building their roster and how they're navigating in comparison to a team like the Bears, who by all means is eating their pile of crap this year to try and really go for it years beyond. And I'm watching the Vikings here who are re-signing Kirk Cousins to another massive deal. They're somehow, and this is what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is called, a competitive rebuild. And they're signing Zadarius Smith to mega money and Harrison Phillips, the D tackle from Buffalo. They are, trying to, they're somehow, because this is where Kwesi comes from, a analytical base, they're trading their number. Don would be able to help me here. Don, where did Jameson Williams get picked? It was like number 12 or something like that. I watched, first off, it's rare to see division foes trade, especially in that range where you're watching the Vikings say, yes, Green Bay, or not Green Bay, Detroit. Yes, Detroit, come on up to the first round where we are. We'll trade back 20-some spots with you, and you can go ahead and pick up Jameson Williams. And then to do it again in the second round where you're letting the Packers jump you to come up and get Christian Watson. And I understand you're getting value for those, but my question is, how much are you moving back for that? And what that ended up looking like is they ended up picking Lewis Seen at the very last pick of the first round. And then because the Lions had the Rams pick that they traded for, so the Lions moved up to select Jameson Williams. The Vikings ended up getting, obviously, more compensation than just this, but the first round pick, they moved up back like 20 spots. And then you look at the second round, and they ended up with Andrew Booth and Ed Ingram, but they lost out on Christian Watson and Jameson Williams. And then fast forward to this time, and I'm seeing them cut Amir Smith-Marset because they traded a fifth-round pick for Jalen Reagor from the Eagles. That could be a fourth, but base level it's a fifth. When you could have had the opportunity to select Jameson Williams or Christian Watson or any of the other guys in those spots, and then you trade a fifth-round pick for Jalen Reagor, when I just have to take you back a few months and realize that Amari Cooper went for a fifth-round pick, and you're trading that for Jalen Reagor. It just, there's a lot of issues right now that I look, I mean, it's cool that we're Bears fans. We can view it kind of from a distance, but I find a lot of the ways that the Vikings are building right now to be very interesting and not necessarily the way I would go about it. So it's unique. And so I did that in exactly 5 minutes. So let's see if it's all just Don Burr fighting with people in the chat, then I think we can close it. And it is. So with that said, glad that we were able to do this for around an hour and 20, hour 30 minutes, hour 20 it is. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. I appreciate you spending some time with me on your Saturday. As always, you can find me at Jordan T. Silveira on Twitter, Barroom Network at Barroom Network on Twitter, Aldo Gandia at Aldo Barkeeper on Twitter. Please like, share the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, do all that fun stuff for the algorithm. We will be returning tomorrow morning for the Barfly Tailgate show after the fantasy mock draft show that Tooch is kind of bringing on different personalities to do with him. And so you will go ahead and see me there as well. But please, as I said, if you'd like to contribute or interact in any way, it's always appreciated. And you all have a wonderful evening. And, of course, as always, bear down. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.